The merciless Sacramento sun beat down on the dusty streets as Isabella Montgomery stepped out of the stagecoach, her brown eyes half closed against the blinding light. Her fingers clutched tightly at the crumpled letter in the pocket of her traveling dress. The last correspondence from William Harrison, her fiancé, dated 3 months ago. The paper, once a symbol of hope and promise, now weighed like lead in his hands. "Miss, are you sure you don't want help with your bags?" asked the stagecoach driver for the 3rd time, an elderly man with a face marked by time. "No, thank you," Isabella replied, maintaining the composure her Boston upbringing required. "My fiancé should be arriving any moment." But Isabella knew, deep in her heart, something was wrong. William should have met her at the station, as he promised in his last letter. The hours dragged on, and the sun began its descent over the horizon, painting the sky with orange tones that only accentuated the desolation of the moment. That's when a group of miners passed by, talking loudly about the latest discoveries in the gold fields. A familiar name caught his attention. "Harrison was right to marry Johnston's daughter. Now he has a stake in the biggest mine in the region," said one of them, spitting tobacco onto the dusty ground. Isabella's world collapsed. Her legs felt weak, and she had to lean on her suitcase to keep from falling. William wouldn't come. I had never planned to come. While she traveled across the country to find him, he was building a new life with another woman. It was in this moment of despair that she saw him for the first time. Tall, with a majestic bearing, Vento Sagrado stood out among passers-by, not only for his Lakota origin, but for the natural dignity he emanated. His discerning black eyes immediately noticed the lonely young woman's distress. "Do you need help?" His voice was deep and calm, with a slight accent that revealed that English was not his first language. Isabella hesitated. All her upbringing warned her about the dangers of trusting strangers, especially in a land as wild as California. But there was something in his eyes, a mix of strength and gentleness, that made her lower her defenses. I have nowhere to go," he admitted, tears finally breaking through his carefully maintained composure. Sacred Wind observed the young girl for a moment, his face revealing an understanding that went beyond words. "I know a safe place. Mrs. Mason has a respectable boarding house not far from here." In the weeks that followed, Isabella discovered an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. Mrs. Mason, a middle-aged widow with a generous heart and a sharp tongue, welcomed her into her modest but impeccable establishment. It was through her that Isabella began to understand the complexities of Sacramento and the gold fever that transformed ordinary men into monsters thirsty for wealth. Sacred Wind, who everyone in town knew only as Sage, became a constant presence in his life. He had left his tribe years before, seeking a different path than what his people expected of him. In Sacramento, he had established himself as an intermediary between miners and local merchants, known for his unwavering honesty. "Why did you leave your tribe?" asked Isabella one afternoon as they watched the city go by from the pension's balcony. "Sometimes the path others choose for us is not the path our spirit needs to follow," he replied, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Like you, I also came looking for something different." It was during these conversations that an idea began to form in Isabella's mind. Miners were constantly in need of supplies, and many traders exploited them at absurd prices. With the business knowledge he had inherited from his merchant father in Boston, and Sacred Wind's experience with the territory and its inhabitants, they could establish something different. But Sacramento was not a place that easily forgave those who defied its unwritten rules. MacDonald, the most powerful merchant in the city, did not look favorably on the partnership between a Bostonian society woman and a Lakota warrior. "This town has its own laws, Miss Montgomery," MacDonald warned during a tense meeting in his office. "It would be a shame if something happened to your partner." The veiled threat only strengthened Isabella's resolve. This was no longer the naive young woman who had arrived in California with romantic dreams. Sacramento had transformed her, as it transformed all who dared challenge its golden sands. "If you think you can intimidate us, Mr. McDonald, you clearly don't understand me or my partner," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. When she left McDonald's office, she found Holy Wind waiting for her. They didn't need words to understand that they were on the brink of a battle that would go beyond commerce. It was a fight for their place in that land of opportunity and danger, where gold wasn't the only thing that made men lose their humanity. "Are we ready for this?" Isabella asked, finally allowing her voice to betray some of her apprehension. Holy Wind looked at her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "My people have a saying, the strongest spirit is forged in the greatest storms." And so, under the infinite California sky, among the elongated shadows of the late afternoon, a new story began to unfold. Not the one Isabella had imagined when she left Boston, but perhaps one even more significant. A story of courage, determination, and a love that was beginning to be born in the most unlikely circumstances, defying the conventions of a world that tried to keep them apart. The morning after her confrontation with MacDonald, Isabella woke up determined to make her idea a reality. The modest room in Mrs. Mason's boarding house, which once seemed a symbol of her failure, now represented a new beginning. Sitting at the small desk, she began to make meticulous calculations in her notebook, taking advantage of the accounting lessons that her father had insisted on teaching her. "Miss Montgomery?" Mrs. Mason's voice interrupted her notes. "Sacred Wind is here to see you." In the main hall of the inn, he was waiting for her with a serious expression. "I found a place," he announced without preamble. "An old warehouse near the river. The owner wants to get rid of it quickly." Isabella followed Vento Sagrado through the busy streets of Sacramento. The contrast between them did not go unnoticed. She in her austere Boston dress, he in his clothes that mixed elements of his Lakota heritage with Western attire. The disapproving looks from passers-by were like arrows, but Isabella kept her head high. The warehouse was a sturdy wooden building, weather-beaten but with solid foundations. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet as they surveyed the expansive space, and light streamed in through the cracks in the roof, creating dancing patterns on the dusty floor. "The price is right," Holy Wind explained, "but we will need considerable repairs." "As?" asked Isabella, already calculating mentally. $500 for the building, the repairs." He hesitated. "Maybe as much." Isabella bit her lip. His inheritance, saved for the marriage that would never take place, totaled $600. It wouldn't be enough. "I can contribute $300, Holy Wind offered, surprising her. "Savings from my work as a middleman." Would it be an egalitarian society then?" Isabella asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the emotion the proposal provoked. "There is no difference between us," he replied simply, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. In the days that followed, the warehouse began its transformation. Isabella discovered that Sacred Wind had extraordinary carpentry skills, a craft he had learned during his travels. She herself was surprised by her ability to organize and negotiate, bargaining prices with suppliers and planning the store's layout. News of his venture quickly spread throughout the city. Some reactions were curiosity, others open hostility. Reverend Parker, a respected figure in the community, visited them during the renovations. "Miss Montgomery," he began in a deep voice, "as a man of God, I must warn you of the dangers of inappropriate associations." "Reverend," Isabella replied, remaining calm, "Christ taught us to see beyond appearances. Holy Wind is my partner, and has all my trust." The religious man left, shaking his head, but his words planted a seed of concern in Isabella. Not because of what they thought of her, but because of the danger that their association could pose to Sacred Wind. One afternoon, as they were organizing the first goods, she expressed her fears. "The people of this town, they can make things difficult for you." Sacred Wind continued his work for a moment before responding. "My people have faced storms worse than the disapproval of fearful men. More MacDonald." "MacDonald is like a coyote," he interrupted. "He barks a lot, but he fears those who show strength." The analogy made her smile, but her worry persisted. "Why are you doing this? Why risk so much to help a stranger?" Holy Wind stopped his work and faced her. "When I saw her that first day, I recognized in her eyes something that I also carry, the desire to find your own path, even if others don't understand it." His words touched something deep in Isabella, a truth she was only beginning to understand about herself. The silence that followed was charged with meaning, interrupted only by the distant sound of miners returning from the river. As the warehouse took shape, Isabella realized that it wasn't just a business being built, but a new version of herself. The young woman who had arrived in Sacramento dreaming of marriage was transforming into a strong and independent businesswoman. One morning, while they were painting the store's sign, MacDonald appeared with two men. "Last chance, Miss Montgomery," he warned. "Sell me this place for $1,000 and save yourself unnecessary trouble." Isabella came down from the stairs where she was, facing him directly. "As I said before, Mr. MacDonald, this establishment is not for sale, for any price." "Then suffer the consequences," he growled, turning to leave. "And remember, accidents happen often around here." When he was gone, Isabella felt her hands shake. Holy Wind approached, lightly touching his shoulder. "You are not alone in this fight," she said softly. That night, alone in her room at the boarding house, Isabella reflected on how her life had changed in such a short time. William's abandonment, which once seemed like a tragedy, now revealed itself as the first step on an unexpected journey. In her prayers, she was grateful for the strength she found in herself and for the presence of Vento Sagrado, whose wisdom and kindness were beginning to awaken feelings in her heart that she still did not dare to name. The warehouse was almost ready. Soon, Montgomery and Sage Trading Post would open its doors, challenging not only MacDonald's monopoly, but also Sacramento's ingrained prejudices. It was more than a deal. It was a declaration of independence, proof that different worlds could come together in common purpose. And as night fell over the city, Isabella knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had found something more precious than gold in the wilds of California. She had found her true destiny. The morning of the opening of the Montgomery and Sage Trading Post dawned with palpable tension in the air. Isabella woke before sunrise, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the collar of her most presentable dress. The mirror reflected a different woman than the one who had arrived in Sacramento. Her brown eyes now carried a determination that had not been there before. On the street, he found Vento Sagrado already unlocking the warehouse doors. The smell of new wood and fresh paint still hung in the air, mixing with Sacramento's omnipresent dust. The shelves, carefully organized the night before, displayed an impressive array of supplies: mining tools, non-perishable foods, sturdy clothing, and basic medicines. "Are you ready?" asked Holy Wind, his black eyes studying her with that intensity that made her heart race. "More than ever," she replied, lifting her chin with determination. The first customers started arriving early, curious miners, attracted by the fairer prices they had announced. Isabella noticed the suspicious looks that some gave Vento Sagrado, but her partner treated them with an unshakable dignity that little by little began to win over even the most skeptical. "Your prices are even better than MacDonald's," commented a middle-aged miner as he examined a shovel. "How do they do it?" "We don't charge for people's fear, only for the fair value of the goods. replied Isabella with a restrained smile. The day was progressing promisingly until 3 men entered the store. Isabella recognized 2 of them as the henchmen who accompanied MacDonald on his last visit. The third, a tall, thin guy with a scar on his face, was unknown. "Nice establishment," said the man with the scar, his drawl carrying a veiled threat. "It would be a shame if something happened to him." Sacred Wind silently moved closer to Isabella, her presence a source of strength and reassurance. "If MacDonald sent them," Isabella replied with a calm she did not feel, "you can tell him that our answer remains the same." The man with the scar laughed, an unpleasant sound that made the few customers present rush out of the store. "MacDonald? No, ma'am. Some of us have our own concerns about establishments that mix races so inappropriately." The words hit Isabella like a slap, but before she could respond, Sheriff Rogers' voice sounded from the door. "Is there a problem here?" Sheriff Rogers was a middle-aged man with discerning eyes that seemed to see right through people. His arrival made the 3 men step back, although the one with the scar maintained a mocking smile. "No problem, Sheriff," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "Just welcoming new traders?" After they left, the sheriff turned to Isabella and Holy Wind. "You guys need to be careful. Sacramento is not a place tolerant of unconventional arrangements." "We're just trying to build an honest business," Isabella protested. "And that's exactly what bothers some people," Rogers responded. "MacDonald is not the only one who benefits from this city's fear and prejudice." That night, after closing the store, Isabella and Vento Sagrado remained to take stock of the first day. Sales had been surprisingly good, despite the intimidation. "We need protection," said Holy Wind as they counted the money. "I know some trustworthy men who could watch the place at night." Isabella nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. "Why do they fear us so much? It's just a store." "It's not the store they fear," he replied softly. "It is change we stand for. For men like MacDonald and his allies, change means loss of power." A significant silence settled between them, broken only by the clinking of the coins they counted. Isabella found herself observing Sacred Wind's hands, strong and calloused, but gentle when handling the coins, hands that had helped build not just a store, but a new possibility for the future. "I never thanked you properly," she said suddenly, "for helping me that first day, for believing in this crazy idea." "There's no need for thanks between partners," he interrupted, his eyes meeting hers with that intensity that made the world around them seem to fade away. It was at that moment that they heard the sound of glass breaking at the back of the store. Holy Wind reacted instantly, pulling Isabella behind a counter as sounds of fighting echoed in the darkness. "Stay here," he whispered, moving silently toward the noise. Isabella felt her heart hammer in her chest as she waited, crouched behind the counter. The seconds dragged by like hours until Holy Wind's voice called her. In the storage area, they found a broken window and struggle marks in the dust on the floor. "There were 2, explained Holy Wind, cleaning a cut on his arm. "They ran away when they saw me." Isabella examined the wound with concern. "We need to clean this up. Come with me to the boarding house. Mrs. Mason has a first aid kit." The walk to the guest house was made in tense silence, their footsteps echoing in the deserted streets of Sacramento. In Mistress Mason's living room, as she cleaned the cut on Holy Wind's arm, Isabella felt a wave of contradictory emotions overcome her. Maybe I should sell the store," she whispered. "I can't be responsible for putting your life at risk." Holy Wind held his hand, stopping his movements. "Isabella," it was the first time he had used her first name, "my life has been at risk since the day I was born with this skin, but I have never let fear determine my path." Their eyes met, and at that moment, something changed between them. The electricity in the air was almost palpable, a force more powerful than all the threats they faced. "I won't give up," she promised, her voice firmer. "No matter what happens." From across the room, Mrs. Mason watched the scene with a knowing smile, understanding that she was witnessing the birth of something deeper than a simple business partnership. In Sacramento, where gold turned men into monsters, a different kind of treasure was being discovered, one that no threat could destroy. The store attack sparked a subtle but significant change in Sacramento. The next morning, as Isabella and Holy Wind cleaned up the broken glass, an unexpected line formed outside. Miners, traders, and even some respectable ladies from the city waited to make their purchases, a clear show of silent support. "I heard about what happened last night," said Mrs. Peterson, wife of the local banker, as she selected fabrics. "It's a shame what some men are capable of doing out of sheer pettiness." Isabella realized that the incident had awakened something in the community, an awareness that violence and intolerance could no longer be accepted as normal. Vento Sagrado, although he maintained his usual reserve, noticed the change in the customers' behavior. Even those who previously avoided his gaze now greeted him with respect. "People are starting to see beyond the fear," he commented during a quiet moment in the store. "It's like the spring thaw, slow but inevitable." The comparison made Isabella smile, but her concern persisted. The cut on Sacred Wind's arm, although superficial, was a constant reminder of the dangers they faced. During the afternoon, she watched him surreptitiously, noticing how he occasionally touched the wound, although he tried not to show discomfort. Sheriff Rogers began making more frequent rounds near the store, and some miners volunteered to stand guard at night. The community was coming together in unexpected ways, but Isabella knew her problems were far from over. One afternoon, while organizing the new shipment of supplies, Isabella heard a commotion in front of the store. McDonald had appeared with his men, blocking the delivery of goods. "I have exclusive contracts with the main suppliers," he declared with a smug smile. "I suggest you look for other sources for your products." Isabella felt her blood boil, but before she could respond, a familiar voice sounded behind her. "Exclusive contracts are illegal in this territory, Mr. McDonald," said Judge Harrison, who had just entered the store. "As I'm sure you know." The merchant visibly paled. Judge Harrison was known for his unyielding integrity, and his presence there was no coincidence. Isabella noticed that more allies appeared when she least expected them. That night, after the store closed, Sacred Wind suggested that they walk to the riverbank. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected off the calm waters. "My people believe that rivers carry the stories of everyone who lived on their banks," he said, his voice soft against the murmur of the water. "What story do you think this river will tell about us?" Isabella felt her heart speed up at the question. "Perhaps it tells about two people who dared to challenge what others considered impossible." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Isabella felt heat rise up her neck as Holy Wind took a step towards her, but they were interrupted by screams coming from the city. "Fire! Fire in the warehouse!" They ran back to find a crowd gathering in front of the store. Smoke was coming out of one of the back windows, but thanks to the quick action of neighbors, the fire was brought under control before it caused serious damage. "I found this," said Sheriff Rogers, showing a broken bottle with kerosene-soaked rags. "It seems our friends have left their mark." Isabella trembled, not with fear, but with anger. "They won't intimidate us." "No," Holy Wind agreed, his voice filled with fierce determination. "They won't." In the days that followed, the store remained closed for repairs, but that didn't stop people from continuing to show up, some to offer help, others just to show support. Mrs. Mason organized a group of ladies to clean up the soot, while miners took turns reinforcing the windows and doors. One afternoon, while they were working on the repairs, Isabella found Vento Sagrado alone in the storage room, contemplating some burn marks on the wall. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, approaching. "In how fire can destroy, but it can also forge something stronger," he replied, turning to face her. "Like steel." Isabella felt something change in the air between them. The closeness, the intensity of his gaze, everything seemed charged with a deeper meaning. "Sacred wind, Sage," he interrupted softly. "To you, I'm just Sage." The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. It was Mistress Mason bringing in more cleaning supplies. Isabella pulled away quickly, her heart beating wildly, aware that something fundamental had changed between them. At night, in her room at the boarding house, Isabella reflected on how her life had transformed. The failed marriage that had brought her to Sacramento now seemed like a distant event, almost insignificant compared to what she was experiencing. Her hands touched the small cross she always wore around her neck, a gift from her mother, and she thought about how she would react upon learning that her daughter was not only running a business of her own, but was also falling in love with a man her society would consider inappropriate. "May God forgive me," she whispered to herself, "but I can't deny what I feel." Outside, the city slept under a starry sky, unaware of the changes taking place within it. In Sacramento, where gold had corrupted so many hearts, a different treasure was being discovered, one that no amount of precious metal could buy. News of the fire at the Montgomery and Sage trading post spread quickly throughout Sacramento, attracting unwanted attention from an unexpected visitor. One particularly hot morning, as Isabella was organizing the new shipment of merchandise, a familiar figure walked through the store door, making her heart freeze. William Harrison, her former fiancé, stood before her, thinner and haggard than she remembered, his fine suit covered in road dust. "Isabella," he said, removing his hat, "you look different." "What are you doing here, Mr. Harrison?" she asked coldly, silently thankful that Holy Wind was making deliveries at that moment. "I came to make peace," he replied, taking a step forward. "Catherine, my wife, she abandoned me. She took all the money and ran away with a gambler." Isabella felt a mixture of emotions, pity, irony, and a pang of satisfaction that immediately embarrassed her. "I'm sorry about your situation, but I don't see how it concerns me." "Bella, darling," he used the old nickname that now sounded false on his lips. "I was a fool. I realized you were the right choice from the start. We can start over, turn this store into something bigger." The back door opened, and Holy Wind entered, stopping abruptly as he assessed the scene. William turned away, his face tightening into an expression of barely concealed disgust. "So the rumors are true," he said, his tone changing to something darker. "You have truly consorted with a savage." "Mr. Harrison," Isabella walked around the counter, standing next to Sacred Wind, "I suggest you leave before you say something you deeply regret." "Don't you realize what you're doing?" William raised his voice. "It's ruining your reputation, destroying any chance of a respectable future." "The only one who destroyed something here was you, when you chose gold over honor," she replied, maintaining her composure. "Now, for the last time, leave my store." William hesitated, his gaze alternating between Isabella and Sacred Wind, who remained impassive but visibly tense. Finally, he put his hat back on and went to the door. "You will regret this choice, Isabella," he threatened. "MacDonald isn't the only one with influence in this town." After he left, Isabella felt her legs weaken. Holy Wind supported her, guiding her to a chair. "Are you well?" he asked softly. "I am," she replied, taking a deep breath. "It's just, seeing him again brought back so many memories." "Memories have power over us only if we let them," said Sacred Wind, his black eyes conveying ancient wisdom. Like shadows, they seem scary until we turn on a light. Isabella smiled weakly, touched by the metaphor. You always know what to say to make me feel better. The rest of the day passed tensely, with Isabella constantly looking at the door, fearing another confrontation. At dusk, as they were closing the shop, Mrs. Mason hurriedly appeared. Isabella, darling, she said, breathless. William Harrison is in the saloon, drunk and making threats. He's saying he's going to solve the Indian problem once and for all. Isabella's blood ran cold. We need to warn Sheriff Rogers. No, Holy Wind interrupted. That's between him and me. No! Isabella grabbed his arm. That's exactly what they want. An excuse to harm you. At that moment, screams and sounds of breaking glass echoed from the street. William, visibly drunk, was staggering towards the store, followed by a group of men. Get out of there, Indian, he shouted. Let's settle this like men. Isabella moved to the front of the store, but Holy Wind stopped her. This time, I need to face this alone. Not alone, said a deep voice. Sheriff Rogers emerged from the shadows, accompanied by several deputies. Mr. Harrison, I suggest you and your friends return home before I have to arrest you for disturbing the peace. William faltered, his eyes red with drink and anger focusing alternately between the sheriff and Holy Wind. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. This isn't over, he muttered, before being led away by his companions. Later, on the pension's balcony, Isabella and Vento Sagrado watched the stars in silence. The incident with William had brought up issues that they had both been avoiding. Sage, she began hesitantly, using her preferred name for the second time. What William said about ruining my reputation. Do you regret it? He asked, his voice controlled, but with a note of vulnerability she rarely heard. No, he replied firmly. I've never regretted anything since I met you, but I'm afraid of what they might do to you because of me. Sacred Wind turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the brightness of the stars. My people have a saying, fear is like a wolf. The more you run, the more it chases. And what should we do then? Face him, he replied, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Together. The touch sent shivers down her spine, and Isabella felt her heart quicken. There, under the starry sky of Sacramento, the barriers between their worlds seemed thinner than ever. Together, she repeated softly, intertwining her fingers with his. The distant sound of music from the saloon floated into the night, mixing with the chirping of crickets and the occasional bark of a dog. Sacramento slept, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its dusty streets, where two hearts challenged not only prejudice and violence, but also their own doubts and fears. And as the stars slowly turned in the sky above them, Isabella realized that some choices, once made, have no turning back. But for the first time since arriving in California, that certainty didn't frighten her. On the contrary, it filled her heart with a fierce determination and hope that not even the shadows of the past could diminish. William Harrison's attempted intimidation had the opposite effect to that intended in Sacramento. In the following weeks, the Montgomery and Sage trading post saw a steady increase in customers, many of whom made a point of publicly demonstrating their support for the establishment. It's like my grandmother always said, Mrs. Mason commented over breakfast. Sometimes it takes a storm to show you who your true friends are. Isabella agreed silently, observing the already intense movement in the streets through the guest house window. William's presence in the city disturbed her more than she would like to admit, not because of her past feelings, but because of the danger he represented. His alliance with MacDonald was all but certain, and the combination of personal bitterness and commercial interests formed an explosive mix. When he arrived at the store that morning, He found Sacred Wind talking to a group of Native Americans he had never seen before. They spoke in Lakota, and although she didn't understand the words, Isabella could feel the intensity of the argument. "My brother Swift Horse brought news from the east," Holy Wind explained after the group left. "Many tribes are being forced off their lands. He came to ask for advice on how to deal with white traders." "And what did you tell him?" "That not all paths need be war," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "That sometimes it is possible to build bridges between different worlds." The exchange of glances was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected customer, Mary Johnston, the woman William had originally married. She looked nervous, her eyes constantly scanning the street through the window. "I need to talk to you," she said, in a low voice, "about William and MacDonald." Isabella led Mary to the office at the back of the store, while Sacred Wind remained at the front, serving customers but remaining alert. "William is planning something big," Mary revealed, twisting a handkerchief between her hands. "He and MacDonald hired men from out of town. I heard them talking about making an example, something that will put things in their place." "Why are you telling us this?" Isabella asked, closely studying the face of the woman who once occupied the place that should have been hers. "Because I know William," replied Mary bitterly. "I saw how he changed when the gold started going to his head. The man we knew is no more." After Mary's departure, Isabella shared the information with Holy Wind. He listened silently, his face a mask of calm that she had learned to recognize as a sign of deep concern. "We need allies," he said finally. "Not only in the city, but also among my people. Swift Horse and his warriors will stay close by." "I don't want anyone to get hurt because of us," Isabella protested. "Sometimes showing strength is the best way to avoid violence," he responded. "My people learned this the hard way." That afternoon, Sheriff Rogers visited the store to report that he had noticed suspicious movement on the outskirts of town. "New faces," he said, "the kind that bring trouble." "What do you suggest we do?" Isabella asked. "Keep your eyes open and don't let your guard down," the sheriff responded, "and maybe it's time to consider some extra security measures." Following the sheriff's advice, Isabella and Sacred Wind began making changes to the store. They installed reinforced locks, built an emergency exit in the back, and established a surveillance system with the help of neighboring businesses. One night, while checking the preparations, Isabella found Sacred Wind watching the sunset through the office window. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, approaching. "How life takes strange paths," he replied, turning to face her. "My people have always said that the Great Spirit has a plan for each of us, even when we can't see it." "And can you see the plan now?" "More clearly every day," he said, his soft voice charged with meaning. The moment was interrupted by the sounds of approaching hooves. Through the window, they saw William Harrison riding down the main street, accompanied by two unknown men. They walked slowly past the store, their gazes filled with silent threats. "They want to scare us," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "And that's why they won't win," Holy Wind replied, gently placing his hand over hers. "Fear only has power over those who allow themselves to be dominated by it." That night, after closing the store, Isabella lingered in the office, organizing the accounting books. Mary's words about William and MacDonald's plans disturbed her, but there was something else occupying her thoughts, something that grew stronger and stronger between her and Holy Wind. "You shouldn't be here alone," his voice surprised her from the doorway. "I thought you left," she replied, feeling her heart race as it always did in his presence. "Not without you," he said simply, the words carrying a weight that went beyond the immediate concern for her safety. Isabella stood up, aware of the electricity in the air between them. "Sage, I know," he interrupted softly. I feel it too. The silence that followed was filled with all the unspoken words, with all the feelings that both of them had been trying to contain. Sacramento, with its prejudices and limitations, seemed very far away at that moment. "What are we going to do?" she whispered, not just referring to the imminent threat from William and MacDonald. "What we've always done," he replied, taking a step towards her. "Face each challenge together, one day at a time." And there, in the silent office of the store they had built together, Isabella felt that they were on the brink of something greater than all the threats they faced, something that no amount of gold or violence could destroy. Tension in Sacramento was building like a storm approaching the mountains. The Montgomery and Sage trading post had become more than just a store. It was a symbol of resistance against the prejudice and greed that dominated the city during the gold rush. One particularly hot morning, Isabella found a mysterious package at the store's door. Inside was a broken Indian necklace and a note written in letters cut from newspaper. "Choose your side before it's too late." His hands shook as he showed the package to Holy Wind. "It's a sacred Lakota necklace," he explained, his eyes darkening with suppressed anger. "Breaking it is a grave offense to my people." "William and MacDonald are trying to provoke a reaction," Isabella said, gently touching his arm. "They want you to lose control." "They don't understand," Holy Wind replied, his voice low but intense. "True strength lies not in violence, but in the ability to resist it." The day passed with a sense of imminent danger. Customers came and went, many of them casting worried glances at the street, where unknown men occasionally passed by on horseback, watching the store with mischievous interest. In the afternoon, Mary Johnston returned, this time more agitated than before. "They're planning something for tonight," she whispered, looking nervously over her shoulder. "William was drinking in the saloon, bragging about how he's going to cleanse Sacramento of certain undesirable influences." Isabella felt a shiver run down her spine. "We need to warn Sheriff Rogers." "The sheriff was called to investigate an alleged robbery at the mines," Mary reported. "He won't be back until tomorrow." "Convenient," commented Holy Wind, who had silently approached. Mary was startled by his presence but continued, "There's more. MacDonald managed to convince some merchants to sign a petition demanding that the city prohibit certain types of business partnerships." "They can't do that," Isabella protested. "There is no law that prohibits our society." "Not yet," Mary replied sadly. "But with enough money, laws can be changed." After Mary's departure, Isabella and Sacred Wind gathered their closest allies. Lady Mason organized a group of women to watch the streets, while Swift Horse and his warriors positioned themselves discreetly on the outskirts of the city. "I can't ask you to risk your lives for us," Isabella told the group gathered at the back of the store. "You're not asking, dear," Mistress Mason replied firmly. "We are choosing to stand with what is right." As night approached, the tension in the city became palpable. Merchants closed their shops earlier than usual, and the streets became deserted except for groups of armed men who moved like shadows between the buildings. "You should go to the boarding house," Holy Wind suggested to Isabella as they checked the store's defenses. "You'll be safer there." "I won't leave you," she replied with determination. "We built this together. We will face whatever comes together." Their eyes met in the gloomy environment of the store, and for a moment the outside world seemed to disappear. Holy Wind raised his hand, gently touching Isabella's face. "Since I left my tribe," he said softly, "I never thought I would find a place to call home again. Until I met you." Isabella felt her heart quicken at the words. "Sage, I—" The sound of breaking glass interrupted the moment. A rock had been thrown through the window, carrying with it a tied note. "Last chance to do the right thing." "The right thing," Isabella murmured bitterly, like there's anything right about hating people for who they are. Heavy footsteps and raised voices began to echo down the main street. William Harrison, visibly drunk, led a group of armed men toward the store. "Get out of there," he shouted, "or we will enter by force." Isabella and Vento Sagrado stood side by side at the entrance of the store, illuminated by the dim light of the lamps. The contrast between them, she in her simple but elegant dress, he in his native dignity mixed with Western clothing, seemed to enrage the attackers even more. "There is no need for violence," Holy Wind said in a calm voice. "This establishment is protected by law." "Law?" sneered William. "The only law that matters is the one that separates right from wrong, natural from unnatural." At that moment, silent figures emerged from the shadows, swift horses warriors, armed and painted for battle. Simultaneously, the town's women, led by Mistress Mason, emerged from various directions, some carrying shotguns. "It appears you are outnumbered," observed Mistress Mason dryly. William faltered, his eyes widening as he realized the situation. His men began to retreat, but MacDonald, who had arrived silently on the scene, advanced. "Are you testifying?" he shouted to the crowd that was beginning to form. "They brought armed savages into our city. That proves everything I've been saying." "The only savages I see here are those who threaten honest people in the middle of the night," replied a strong voice. Judge Harrison had arrived, accompanied by his own men. The presence of the judicial authority finally broke the resolve of the group of attackers. William, realizing defeat, staggered back, his eyes fixed on Isabella with a mixture of hatred and something that might have been remorse. "This isn't over," he muttered before disappearing into the darkness, followed by his men. When the dust settled and the crowd began to disperse, Isabella and Sacred Wind remained at the store's entrance, their bodies close but not touching, aware of the eyes still on them. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," he replied, "we continue building our path, one day at a time." And as the night progressed over Sacramento, bringing with it the promise of new challenges, Isabella realized that some battles are won not with weapons or violence, but with the silent strength of those who refuse to let fear dictate their destinies. The morning after the attack brought with it not only the rising sun over Sacramento, but also a new reality for Isabella and Sacred Wind. News of the confrontation spread quickly, transforming the Montgomery and Sage trading post into an even more powerful symbol of resistance and change. "Times are changing," Mrs. Mason commented as she helped clean the shards of glass from the broken shop window. "But some people would rather break the world than accept that it is no longer the same." Isabella watched Sacred Wind from the other side of the store, supervising the installation of the new glass. The closeness they had shared the night before, that interrupted moment of almost confession, hung between them like an unfulfilled promise. "I received this morning," said Judge Harrison, who had appeared unannounced. In his hands, an official document from the City Hall. MacDonald got the City Council to call a special meeting to discuss regulations on suitable business partnerships. "They can't do that," Isabella protested, though her voice betrayed the uncertainty she felt. "Legally, no," the judge agreed. "But MacDonald has a lot of gold to go around, and gold has a peculiar way of making people reinterpret laws." Holy Wind approached silently, his presence bringing that familiar feeling of strength and calm that Isabella had learned to value so much. "When will the meeting be?" he asked. "In 3 days," replied the judge. "I suggest you prepare yourselves. MacDonald will not give up easily." After the judge's departure, Isabella and Sacred Wind found themselves alone in the office, the air between them thick with unspoken words. "We need to talk," she said finally, gathering her courage. "About last night. About what almost happened," he added, his black eyes meeting hers with that intensity that made her heart race. Yes. Isabella took a deep breath. Sage, what are we doing? This store, our partnership. It's turning into something more, isn't it? It's been something more since day one, he replied softly. Since I saw you alone on that platform, lost, but still strong. The silence that followed was interrupted by the arrival of Fast Horse, bringing worrying news. MacDonald has hired bounty hunters, he reported in Lakota, with Holy Wind translating for Isabella. Dangerous men, known for their brutality against our people. The news fell like a stone in Isabella's stomach. He's trying to provoke a bigger conflict, she concluded. If there is violence involving natives, the city will have the excuse it needs to force us to close, added Vento Sagrado. The following hours were dedicated to strengthening their defenses. The community mobilized again, honest miners, merchants sympathetic to the cause, the women of the town led by Mrs. Mason. The store became a center of resistance against the greed and prejudice that threatened to destroy not just a business, but the very possibility of a different future. I received a letter from Boston, Isabella told Holy Wind as they organized supplies at dusk. My family, they heard about the store, about our partnership. And what do they say? My mother is horrified, of course. Isabella smiled sadly. But my father, he wrote something interesting. He said that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you really need. Sacred Wind considered the words for a moment. Your father is a wise man. He also said he's proud of me. She continued, her voice breaking. Proud that I found my own path, even if it's not what they imagined for me. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected off the store's newly installed windows. Outside, Sacramento continued its routine, seemingly oblivious to the drama unfolding within those walls. Sage, Isabella called softly, if the city rules against us, if we are forced to close, then we will find another way, he replied firmly. My people survived because they learned to adapt without losing who they are. We can do the same. Together? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. In response, Sacred Wind took her hands in his. The gesture, simple but deeply meaningful, carried the weight of all the taboos they were challenging, all the conventions they had chosen to ignore. Love, he said in his native tongue before translating, is like the wind on the prairies. It cannot be fenced in or controlled. It blows where it will, breaking down fences and barriers that men build. Isabella felt tears form in her eyes, not from sadness, but from an emotion so deep that words seemed inadequate to express it. I don't care what the city council decides, she declared with sudden ferocity. I don't care what MacDonald or William or anyone else thinks. I found something here that's worth more than all the gold in California. The moment was interrupted by urgent knocks on the door. It was Mary Johnston, breathless and pale. They're coming, she warned. MacDonald, William, the bounty hunters, they're planning an attack for tonight. They want to end everything before the town hall meeting. Isabella and Sacred Wind exchanged glances. No words were needed. Within minutes, the defense plan they had prepared was in action. Signals were sent, allies summoned, positions taken, and as night fell over Sacramento, bringing with it the promise of violence, Isabella Montgomery, the refined lady of Boston, and Sacred Wind, the Lakota warrior, stood side by side, their hands still clasped, their hearts beating in a rhythm that defied all written and unwritten laws of the Old West. The coming battle wasn't just for the survival of one store. It was for the possibility of a love that transcended barriers, for the hope of a future where different worlds could meet without fear or prejudice. And for that, it was worth fighting for. Night fell over Sacramento like a heavy curtain, bringing with it the promise of violence that Mary Johnston had announced. Isabella and Sacred Wind transformed the store into a makeshift fortress, with allies strategically positioned at key points. "Swift Horse's warriors are ready," Holy Wind reported, returning from a quick inspection, and Mrs. Mason organized a group of armed women on the neighboring rooftops. Isabella nodded, checking once again the small pistol her father had taught her to use years ago in Boston. He had never imagined that he would need her, much less in these circumstances. "I have something for you," said Holy Wind, taking a small leather bundle from his pocket. Inside was a finely crafted Lakota amulet. "It was my mother's. She said she would protect my heart when I found her true home." The words hit her with overwhelming force. "Sage, I—" The sound of hooves interrupted the moment. MacDonald and William had arrived, leading a sizable group of armed men. In the torchlight, their faces looked like distorted masks of hatred and greed. "Last chance!" cried MacDonald. "Leave now, and perhaps we will spare your lives." "The town is watching, MacDonald," replied Judge Harrison, emerging from the shadows with his own men. "Think carefully about what you're going to do. The city will see how we deal with those who corrupt our morals," William shouted, his voice choked with drink and bitterness. The first shot came from one of the bounty hunters, hitting the new window and shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Chaos ensued immediately. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire and shouting as both sides sought cover. Isabella and Sacred Wind moved in perfect synchronization, as if they had been training for this moment their entire lives. She coordinated the defense of the front of the store, while he ensured the back remained secure. "MacDonald's men are trying to circle the alley," warned Mistress Mason from her elevated position. At that moment, a Lakota war cry cut through the night. Swift Horse and his warriors emerged from the shadows, their imposing presence causing the attackers to retreat in confusion. "Look!" cried MacDonald, pointing. "They brought savages to attack honest citizens." "The only savages here are you," replied Mistress Mason, her voice full of contempt, "attacking an honest store in the middle of the night." The fighting continued, but something had changed. Sacramento residents, attracted by the gunshots, began to gather at the ends of the street. Their faces revealed not fear of the Lakota warriors, but revulsion at the actions of MacDonald and his men. William, realizing that they were losing public support, tried one last desperate move. He staggered toward the store's entrance, brandishing a torch. "If we can't have the store," he shouted, "no one will." Isabella saw the moment in slow motion. William throwing the torch, the flames licking the wooden facade, Holy Wind rushing towards him. But it was Mary Johnston who acted first, emerging from the shadows to take down her ex-husband with a well-aimed blow from a shovel. "This is for all the dreams you destroyed," she said, as William lay dazed on the floor. The fire, however, began to spread. Isabella and Vento Sagrado led a human chain, passing buckets of water to fight the flames. Even some of MacDonald's embarrassed men joined the effort. "Arrest these men," ordered Sheriff Rogers, who had returned to town amid the chaos. "MacDonald, William Harrison, you are under arrest for attempted murder and arson." As the sun began to rise, dyeing the Sacramento sky with shades of pink and gold, the battle was over. The storefront was scorched but intact, a testament to the resilience of not just the structure, but the spirit of those who defended it. "The city council will meet today," Judge Harrison informed, approaching Isabella and Sacred Wind. "After tonight, I doubt anyone will support MacDonald's proposals." Isabella looked at Sacred Wind, noticing a cut on his forehead that would need tending. Without thinking about the consequences or the looks of others, he took his handkerchief and gently wiped the blood from his face. "We need to talk," she said softly. "Above all." "Yes," he replied, his black eyes reflecting the sunrise. "Above all." Mrs. Mason, observing the scene, smiled with satisfaction. "I'm going to make breakfast for everyone," she announced. "After all, It's not every day that Sacramento learns such an important lesson about love and courage. As the city awakened to a new day, Isabella held the Lakota amulet around her neck, feeling its comforting weight. The battle for the store was won, but she knew the real battle, the one raging in her heart, was just beginning. "What do your people say about loving someone the world says you shouldn't love?" she asked Holy Wind when they were finally alone. "They say true love is like the prairie wind," he replied, gently touching the amulet around her neck. "It knows no borders, respects no fences, and changes the landscape in ways no one can predict." And there, between the ashes of a battle and the dawn of a new day, Isabella Montgomery knew that she had found not only her place in the world, but also her true destiny, a destiny that no law, prejudice, or social convention could prevent. The sun rose over Sacramento, its golden rays illuminating a city that had awakened differently after the events of the previous night. The Montgomery and Sage trading post, its facade charred but still standing, had become a symbol of change that even its founders had not initially imagined. Isabella observed the movement of the street through the newly installed glass, her reflection overlapping the figures passing by outside. The Lakota amulet around his neck glowed softly in the morning light, a constant reminder of the path he had chosen. "The city council is meeting now," Mrs. Mason reported, entering the store with a tray of fresh coffee. "Mary Johnston went to testify against William and MacDonald. Who knew that woman had so much strength inside her?" "Sometimes," Isabella replied, "we need to lose everything to discover what we are truly capable of." Holy Wind entered the store, bringing with it the fresh morning air and that presence that always made Isabella's heart race. The cut on his forehead had been carefully treated, but it was still a vivid reminder of the battle they had faced. "Swift Horse and his warriors set out at dawn," he announced, "but they left a message. The doors of your tribe are always open to us." The meaning of those words hung in the air between them. It was more than an invitation. It was the promise of a refuge if Sacramento proved too inflexible to accept what they had become to each other. The day passed in subdued tension as the city awaited the council's decision. Customers walked in and out of the store, many offering words of support or simply a respectful wave. News of the previous night's events had spread quickly, transforming Isabella and Sacred Wind's story into something bigger than themselves. "You know," said an old miner as he bought supplies, "I spent 50 years digging holes in the earth looking for gold, but only now do I understand that some things are worth more than all the precious metal in the world." In the afternoon, Judge Harrison appeared at the store, his normally stern face softened by a discreet smile. "The council has voted," he announced. "MacDonald's proposal was unanimously rejected. More than that, they approved a new law prohibiting discrimination in commercial establishments based on race or origin." Isabella felt her legs weaken with relief, and Holy Wind was instantly at her side, his strong arm offering support. "What about William and MacDonald?" she asked. "They will face trial for attempted murder and arson," the judge replied. "Mary Johnston has promised to testify, as have several other citizens. They won't be bothering anyone else for quite some time." When the judge left, Isabella and Vento Sagrado found themselves alone in the store's office, the same place where, the night before, they had been so close to confessing their feelings. "Sage," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "about your mother's amulet." "Among my people," he interrupted softly. "When a warrior finds his true mate, he offers something that carries the story of his ancestors, not just as a gift, but as a promise." "What kind of promise?" she whispered, although her heart already knew the answer. "A promise that two different paths can become one," he replied, moving closer. "That love can create bridges between worlds that others thought impossible to connect." Isabella touched the amulet around her neck, feeling its significant weight. What if the world is not ready to accept this union? The world is rarely ready for change, he said, a soft smile on his lips. That's why we need to be brave enough to lead the way. The afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, creating a golden pattern on the wooden floor. Outside, Sacramento continued its routine, but within those walls, a historic moment was about to come to fruition. "I love you," Isabella declared, the words flowing naturally like water from a stream. "I don't care what anyone else thinks or says. You are my home now." Sacred wind touched his face with a gentleness that contrasted with his physical strength. "And you are my open sky, my endless prairie," he replied in Lakota, before translating so she could understand. When their lips finally met, it was as if all the battles, all the prejudices, and all the pain they had faced had just been preparation for this moment. The kiss carried the flavor of victory, of freedom, and of a love that had grown not despite adversity, but through it. Mrs. Mason, who had entered silently with more coffee, smiled at the scene and discreetly withdrew, tears of joy in her eyes. In the weeks that followed, the Montgomery and Sage trading post flourished as never before. The store became a symbol of a new era in Sacramento, a place where different cultures met and learned from each other. Swift Horse and his warriors became regular trading partners, establishing trade routes that benefited both the city and neighboring tribes. Isabella and Vento Sagrado were married in a ceremony that mixed white and Lakota traditions, celebrated by both the local reverend and a tribal elder. Mrs. Mason organized a party that brought the entire town together, proving that love, when true and courageous, has the power to break down even the oldest barriers. And so, in the golden lands of California, where so many had come in search of material riches, two souls found a treasure far more precious: the freedom to love beyond the boundaries of prejudice and the courage to build a world where different paths could become one. The Montgomery and Sage trading post remained a living testament to this truth, its doors always open to all who sought not only goods, but also hope. And on clear nights, when the sun set over Sacramento, painting the sky with impossible colors, Isabella and Sacred Wind watched the horizon together, knowing that they had not only found their place in the world, but helped create a better world for those who would come after.